What is up, world? We're back once again. It is the CHGO Sky Show presented by CHGO Sports and DraftKings. As always, use the code DraftKings use the code CHGO at DraftKings for $20 on bonus bets as soon as you open your account. Aside from the stumbles, we got the man, the myth, and the legend, Stephen Garner, as always in the show, showing off the 3-3 and the 23 on his back wall. And our special guest for today, Marquee Sports, Big Ten Sports, and the erstwhile most decorated play-by-play man that's ever been on the show, Jason Ross Jr. Jason, welcome to the show. Stephen, it's always good to have you on, man.
Thank you, Chris. Really appreciate that intro. Admire the work that you guys do. I was pumped to do this today. Love the intro, by the way, before with the music. That got me amped up, all the Chicago scenery. So, no, I really love the work you guys do. Thanks again for having me on. Really appreciate it. Pumped to talk some Sky today.
Yes, sir.
We appreciate you.
No doubt. No doubt. Like I said, we've got a big game tonight, national television broadcast, the Sky versus the Aces, tipping off around 6:30, 7 o'clock p.m. Central Time. And I know both of you are going to be there for that. So again, appreciate you coming on the show, Jason. Just want to talk to you a little bit at the outset about your background. It's always a different path, I think, that leads people into broadcasting, and especially into the world of professional basketball, women's basketball. So how'd you get here, man?
Yeah, you're right. Like, there's no one path, I feel like, in our industry. And that's kind of the cool, unique aspect of carving out your own way in life and in broadcasting in particular. I grew up in Detroit, so I loved actually the 2004 Pistons.
I knew you were going to say that Pistons team.
Yeah, that was my team that got me into the game of basketball, and also loved all different sports. The Red Wings were really good at the time. Kind of a few years after that, and Tigers, the Lions. So just kind of grew up a big sports fan. My family loved it, college sports too. And I think around the middle school age, started to kind of realize that it would be really neat to be the voice behind these basketball highlights or hockey highlights or football highlights I was always watching. So started to realize play-by-play could be a potential career. And that's when I was just studying it, consuming it. Same thing, high school, college, trying to find as many opportunities as I could. And did a variety of different things, working for universities, the college I went to as well, called a lot of games there, interned all over Detroit with either the pro teams or working with universities, and just got as many reps as I could. I worked in independent baseball as well for a little bit, and had my own show. It was a digital show with a friend of mine where we would cover Detroit sports. So kind of ran the gamut of experiences. I, at one point, was writing for Sports Illustrated in college and doing reporting for them, and then made the move to Chicago, going on a year and a half ago now, which feels like it was just yesterday. Started off doing some fill-in play-by-play with the Blackhawks, and again, growing up a huge hockey fan, felt like a really prestigious opportunity to be a part of that organization and be involved with them, and that was amazing, that experience. And then getting involved with, I work for Big Ten Network as well, and ESPN and Fox, and a few other networks along with you in the Chicago Sky. So it's really kind of been I use the term running the gamut of experiences, and that's kind of what it's been. So that's been really amazing, and it's helped me grow as a broadcaster too. And my favorite part about living here is probably the broadcasters that we have in Chicago, and sitting back, turning on my TV and just studying them. I know you guys on the Bulls show have had Adam Amin on, and he's one of my favorite broadcasters to study. He's a huge inspiration for me. So just being able to turn on the TV and see guys like that, and the women in our industry as well here, it's been amazing to study them and just soak things in and be a part of it. And calling the Chicago Sky games, just being a part of basketball in this city, which has such a huge history. You see the jersey behind Steven there with the 23 on the back. Like, just being here and experiencing that is amazing. So yeah, that's kind of how it started, long story short.
No doubt, man. Yeah. I like you mentioned Adam. Have you found a catchphrase, or have you found like a signature moment like Adam has gotten in his bag on the Bulls broadcast yet?
Not yet. I got to think of one though. Not yet. I've not got my signature kind of go-to call down yet for different moments, but Adam and Stacey do a great job with that.
Yeah, man, I gotta ask. So you mentioned that 04 Pistons team.
Yep.
Of course, that's known as one of the more gritty basketball teams in basketball history. Who is your favorite player from that team?
That's a hard one,
Who
Steven.
do you choose from?
So fun fact, Steven, I think I have the entire starting lineup, maybe nearly the entire team in bobbleheads. So I'm a big bobblehead collector. And I'll have to send a picture of that to you guys one day. But, from the coaching down, Larry Brown was the coach. He's a legend. Chauncey Billups, who's coaching now himself, just kind of was such a steady force at point guard. Stephen, we love the details of the game. So the off-the-ball movement of Rip Hamilton.
Yes, legendary.
Around screens. I mean, he could just run for days. Ben Wallace, of course, about to be a Hall of Famer. Rasheed Wallace, Tayshaun Prince. That's a hard one to choose. If I ever played growing up, shooting was kind of my thing. So I feel like maybe I'd have to go Rip Hamilton. And the mask, too, that Rip used to wear.
That's it. Yeah, Rip has such a impact on basketball with that off-ball movement and the way that Larry used him and how that kind of it was a different type of spacing, but it helped to kind of revolutionize the basketball game on the NBA level just because they won doing it and it was so unique. Obviously, it wasn't to the extent of the Warriors or the Houston Rockets, but it was unique, especially given the time of it. So if I had to choose one, I'll probably be right there with you with Rip. Although I'm always partial to point guards, and Big Shot Billups is one of those guys for sure.
For sure, yeah, and that was the nickname, Mr. Big Shot. People forget that, I think. And the defense, too, of that team was so gritty, and people maybe forget they were not supposed to beat the Lakers in the finals that year, and they did pretty handily. So.
Yeah, Tayshaun Prince is ridiculous. Yep. Just ridiculous. He was created in a lab, especially, again, given the context of that time of basketball, just special. And then Ben Wallace being one of the best players on the defensive side as an undersized center, again, in that era of basketball, that was just a beautiful team. It was just beautifully ugly.
Yep, true. And I love that you used the word team. It was team basketball. And it's hard to think of other teams that really didn't have that kind of go-to star player name, especially nowadays, who go on to win a championship. And that was a string of conference finals appearances, too. That was a good time for basketball in Detroit. That team definitely got a lot of people around my age into Detroit sports.
Yeah, most definitely.
No, and it pains me a little to say, just because it's Detroit. But
Totally understand.
Detroit in the 2000s with that Pistons team, with the Detroit Shock that went to back-to-back WNBA Finals, 1 in 06, the Red Wings, even the Tigers going into the World Series in 2006. You came up at a really good time for Detroit sports. And I say it pains me because, the Midwest cities are always rivals until somebody from outside the Midwest tries to talk down on us. Speaking of people might trying to talk down on the Midwest, tonight's game, let's start off with that. It's Las Vegas Aces coming into Chicago, the presumptive favorite to win the finals, not just get to the finals. And the Sky are looking to really cement themselves a place into the playoffs at this time. This is, as I was talking to Steven the last couple of weeks, it really seems like with Vegas, those are the games you kind of just accept that you're going to take a licking, try to minimize the damage and move on. But you've been around the team all season long. What do they have to do? What can they do tonight to put Vegas on notice or outright win the game? What has to happen for the Sky tonight?
Yeah, well, Steven, I think that, for me, you have to stay out of foul trouble against a team like this. And Chris, throughout the season, that's going to be an issue in our front court a little bit. We have very good defensive players in our front court. Elizabeth Williams, Alana Smith is going to put the league on notice with her defense this year.
Yes.
But, I think, like you said, with Vegas, when you look at the schedule, this is a favorable overall outside of this game patch in the Sky schedule. So heading into last weekend, I had the chance to call those games with my good friend Megan McEwen. And those felt like big games because, no team in this league is a pushover. But when we play Phoenix and Seattle again this weekend, and we just played them last weekend. Those are the bottom two teams in the league. It feels like we were kind of looking at it as this patch. Okay, Vegas is sandwiched in the middle. but you have to take advantage of the games around it to kind of work back up to that 500 mark right now. They're 8 and just picked up the 9th win of the season this past week, but you're kind of 4 games below 500 at the moment. So you're trying to get back up to that point to potentially avoid, I know we'll get to this at some point, but hopefully you don't have Vegas as your first round date in the playoffs.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's what it looks like. So you're trying to avoid that. But to get back to the game itself, I think A'ja Wilson is such a tough player to slow down. So you really can't get into foul trouble tonight with your bigs because your shot blockers have to be on the floor. At times you may have to help and potentially double her, which you really can't double against Vegas when the 5 is on the floor. I know Candace has missed a string of games now, so we may not see her tonight. But you look at this starting 5 that they put out, and you think of Jackie Young and what she has done this season, possibly gotten even better. They just have so much talent. Chelsea Gray was just, it's hard to find a word to describe her in the playoffs last season. We just had Seattle this past week, and something we brought up when we kind of had a big lead on Seattle was that the Sky and the Storm were on track to maybe play each other in the finals last year. And I think some Sky fans are maybe rooting for Seattle to make the finals. I think a lot of people were with Sue Bird being in her final year. But Chelsea Gray she was unstoppable against the Storm, and they couldn't beat her. And now Seattle's rebuilding, and it's a team in Vegas that definitely looks better than they were a year ago. And players like Jackie Young are somehow better than they were a year ago. And they have a great coach in Becky Hammond. And it feels like they are definitely far and away the favorite right now. You look at a team like Connecticut, they have a forward, Brianna Jones, who was injured. They were looking really good early on. I still think they might have a chance outside of New York to, maybe wreak some havoc a little bit in the playoffs. A team like Washington, every game they're dealing with a new injury and someone's out. They just never have the same starting 5. But they look like they have some good potential outside of Vegas. And then, of course, New York is the team I haven't brought up. I was kind of waiting to bring them up because the Sky have beaten New York this year. And if you look at an example of a team where you should give yourself motivation or inspiration going into a night like Vegas, you can say that you have beaten New York this year. And they almost beat New York twice if you look at those 2 matchups they played. And I see a comment coming in here, Dana, hoping to get her in a groove. I feel like offensively, if you can get your bench involved a bit more right now, that's key because you need your bench at some point to step up. And that was kind of a part of the struggles over the course of the 4-game losing streak we were on that fortunately snapped Saturday night in Seattle. Some hoping that maybe you get some more production from the bench, and you need to stay out of foul trouble, and you got to find a way to slow down somehow that starting 5 and maybe turn them over a little bit and get them frustrated.
I think you made a ton of excellent points and just kind of detailing who the aces are and why they're so good.
Yeah.
I think a lot of what kind of gets lost with the offensive high-end talents that they've compiled is that they also have quite literally the best defense in the W this season. Yeah. And I think for kind of speaking with Becky over All-Star break, she was making emphasis that everything that they were trying to curate and maintain and sustain was the defensive side. She said in the playoffs last year, the offense was never really a problem. It was more so how often could they get stops and how often could they string together multiple stops. And if you look at the season as a whole, they've taken a lot of great strides in moving in alignment with what Becky is saying that she wants to see more from them. And obviously at the forefront of all that is A'ja Wilson. Again, she gets a lot of credit for how skilled and how evolutionary of a player she is on the offensive side, but on defense, especially this season, she may not necessarily be as good as she was last year, but she's got the loud stat impact in terms of stats or in terms of steals and blocks. And she's just really the anchor of everything they do defensively. She's scheme versatile. You can use her in multiple lineups. She can switch out and guard against your point guard and hold it down for a couple of dribbles late in the shot clock. She can steal the ball from your point guard, which is something that outside of Alyssa Thomas and Breanna Stewart, no other center is really doing in the WNBA right now. It's all of the things that they need from the defensive side is where she really just tilts the scale heavily in their favor. So I think for the Sky, looking at it from their perspective, I think, Jason, you made a great point in Dana having to bring that energy off the bench against the Aces last game. a couple of months ago at their home court. She had a couple of moments where she ripped up Chelsea Gray. She was pressuring her full court. She was sending a lot of their offensive sets off script. She even had a moment where she got switched on to Asia Wilson and stripped the ball from her and went down in transition, and she might have got a layup off of that. So her being that spark plug that we know she can be, not just on the defensive side, but also on offense, getting to the paint, getting paint touches because nobody can stick in front of her because her first step is as quick as anybody's. Her getting into that bag, and I think I've been hashtagging it downhill Dana, having that impact on the offense is as important as anything she can bring outside of the defensive side, just because it puts everybody else in positions to play off of advantages created from somebody else. So that's extremely important for them, specifically off the bench. But in addition to that, I think if they take care of the ball, they can do a lot of what they want to do to this Aces team just because they have the type of offensive skill sets that you need to operate against a defense that's as versatile as theirs. They can manipulate switches and manipulate space, but none of that matters if they're not taking care of the ball consistently. And that was part of the issue they had against the Aces in that first matchup. So I'm looking forward to them really taking what they saw in the last game as far as things that worked for them with their empty corner pick and rolls and things like that, and just taking care of the ball in those scenarios and really just spamming them over and over again because that's where they can create their most advantages from.
Yep, I think that's so true. Like you said, creating off advantages that other players bring to the table. I think in my mind, I think when we can get rebounds or steals and Courtney can push the break and get us up and down the floor quickly, that's when we can maybe hopefully beat someone up the floor. Maybe you have an advantage going the other way. So I feel like that is a really important point. And like you said, the Aces defense does kind of go either overlooked or underrated because of how explosive their offense is. I think, maybe you never say never again. They're the heavy favorites, but first round of the WNBA, you do have that best 2 out of 3 format where, like last year, the Sky kind of went through it with New York winning that opening game, and all of a sudden you have pressure on you going back to the lower seeds' hometown. So potentially maybe that happens, but it's hard to envision someone beating Vegas 4 times.
Yeah, definitely I couldn't agree more with that.
Yeah, it's wild because their net rating has been so off the charts that they're set to break a lot of records that the 2019 Washington Mystics set. And when I watched that team play with what they had with Elena Deladon and Emma Mieseman and the emergence of Ariel Atkins as a 3-point shooter, and then Christy Tolliver, Natasha Cloud, Ariel Powers, the crew that they had offensively, defensively. I didn't think we were going to see a team like that for a while at least. And then the Aces just burst onto the scene, so to speak, when they made just one small change. And it's funny that Stephen, you talk about the defense. That game that they had against the Sky last year where it looked like they were going to just blow them out of the building, and the Sky ended up with the biggest comeback in league history. I think that set the Aces on the path that they're on now, in terms of just making sure that they were able to shore up their defense. Getting Candace Parker is a coup in any case, but you have a player like Candace Parker who's an efficient two-way player, one of the best in league history. Kaya Stokes has kind of cemented herself as a defensive anchor, and you have all of those players who are committed to running it back. So they're going to be committed to doing those things that it takes to win games, like defense. As for some listener questions here, and it relates to not just tonight's game, but to the playoffs. And our longtime listener, Master Bear Jedi, asked, do you think James Wade's departure has affected the way the Sky attacked the rim? And have you seen the fouls change in any way against her for the Sky? Now, Jason, I remember I've seen some games. I've heard Megan have some comments in terms of how contact is called. But in this small sample size that we've had where Emre's been at the helm, have you seen the Sky attacking the rim in a different way? And have you seen the way that they're getting to the line possibly look different?
I think something we maybe noticed is you would love to, and I think there are different details that go into this, and Stephen, I'll see if you agree, you would love to see maybe an aggressive mindset of going to the rim. And I think we started to see that more straightforward against Seattle last time out. I think also turnovers over the course of that losing streak can play a role in just taking you out of your offensive flow. So trying to limit that, which sounds simple, but I think is so important when it comes to the details of your offense. really helps with getting to the rim. I do like the uptick in offense recently from Elizabeth Williams. So if you can continue to feed her, and she knows that she can score the basketball consistently. So hopefully that starts to play a role a bit more. But, I think the inside out game also, if you can get to that and your guards driving, like Dana has talked about, not settling, which I love. And she has all the speed in the world. So if she can get into the paint and then kick it out, and you do have shooters on this team, you have Marina Maybury, Courtney Williams can knock it down. Alana Smith can step out, and she does have the capability to hit threes too. A Morgan Birch off the bench hit a three last time out. So you do have the ability to do that. And I think getting inside can mean more than just shooting too. That can mean getting inside and kicking it out for more threes. So I would like to see that pretty often. Yeah, if you can get to the rim as much as possible. And what was the second part of the question, Chris?
Really about, it kind of goes hand in hand. If you attack the rim, you're usually going to get more chance of getting fouls called. But have you seen a change in the way that fouls have been called? I know we have, I wanted to go to the Elizabeth Williams graphic as you mentioned her, but I saw something interesting with Ka, that she has hit her last 17 foul shots, in addition to just really being on an offensive tear over the last month or so. And foul shooting was kind of an issue for her early in the season, really through the All-Star break. And I wouldn't say it's rectified itself, but when you get on a streak like that, it feels like things are turning the right way for her to be even more aggressive than she already is, and then be able to hurt teams when she gets to the line. So have you seen a difference in the way fouls have been called for or against the team over the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, she went 11 for 11 from the line on Saturday night, and the team took, I believe, 29 free throws. We were pretty shocked by that because the team hasn't really made free throws consistently or taken free throws consistently all year. So that has been a struggling point, I think, is the big picture here throughout the course of the season. So like you said, you get to the rim more, and maybe those numbers go up, but hitting the free throws is another thing. Have to start doing that consistently, and we saw that on Saturday night. In terms of how the game is called, I have personally enjoyed the ability to challenge calls this year, and we got off to a really good start with that. Actually, when James Wade was still a head coach, I believe he started 2 of 2 or 3 for 3 or something like that.
He was really proud of that stat.
Yeah, he got off to a stellar start with the coach challenges. So he set the bar pretty high there. But I do like that aspect of how it's called this year. It's a hard thing. I think when you're a fan of a team, it's always a subjective thing. Is your team getting the calls that they should get? Certain players, it is interesting to see how certain players are officiated. Maybe if I switch to the defensive side of things, just with how players move their feet, their body types. We know Emory has actually brought in officials to practice to kind of work specifically on the foul side of things. Are you committing good fouls or are you committing bad fouls? I think if you're committing a foul that's, 30 feet away from your basket, that's not a very good foul. But if it is legitimate defensive position and you're making a good effort play, if I'm getting this correctly, I think that's what he's aiming for, that if you're in the right position, hopefully if you get called for a foul, maybe it happens, but you want to limit the bad fouls against you, because I think that's maybe more so the story is trying to avoid our bigs potentially getting into foul trouble. And we have really good defenders, and sometimes it is how the game is called, but just trying to limit that as much as possible is going to be key, especially in a game like tonight.
Yeah, I think, again, you made a lot of great points and kind of looking at things being a little different under Emory versus how they were with James. I think the first thing that stands out to me, and this is something that me and Chris spoke on our last episode out of the All-Star break, was that I think at that point it was a 4-game sample size under Emory. It was the spacing that just looked different. It seemed like they weren't necessarily doing things different. It was just more of a point of emphasis and you can kind of see if you watch the games on replay with James or with Jason calling them, you see a lot of times Emory's on the sideline doing this and trying to just keep everything spaced out after an initial action might not either work or breaks down or they have to reset. You'll see them just doing this, and then players will figure out their way to occupy a space that gives them more real estate to work with for whoever has the ball. And I think that's really been working to their advantage. And it's kind of gotten to the point where they're not just using that space just to reset, but they're starting to manipulate it. Like I mentioned with the empty corner pick and rolls, as well as with Marina Mabry stashing her a pass away and finding their shooters in strategic spots to where when they're in their pick and roll, they can kind of manipulate the help defense that comes with it because Courtney Williams is so prolific in that offensive context. And I think in looking at Kalia Copper, in addition to the manipulation of space, a lot of times she's been stashed on the second side of actions, which is something I kind of talked about this season a lot because she's been enjoying a career best 3-point shooting rate off the catch. Right. And she's been north of 40%. I think she's at like 41%, if I'm not mistaken. And a lot of those shots are coming when Courtney's coming off of a pick on one side of the floor. A little bit of help comes from that to kind of take away the pressure on the paint, and then it skips around to Kai, and she's able to either attack a closeout, which she's the best in the W at, or she's able to take advantage of the short closeouts that she gets because of the threat of her first step, and she's able to knock down these 3-point shots off the catch. And it's just a space where Kai is minimal effort for her because she's not the one that's pulling all the strings. She's playing off of an advantage created from someone else. And I think that's where all of the pieces for the Sky really start to fit together. When you put Marina in positions to where help defense has to make a decision, and either way, it's a bad decision. Or if you have Khalil on the second side and now she's not operating with the ball in her hands and she's able to just kind of do things off the dribble and off the catch more than anything else, I think that's where they kind of optimize the talents and the skill sets of each of their best players in a unison, in a sense. And to kind of answer the question directly, I won't necessarily say is drives. I think it's just more so a byproduct of the better spacing. Better spacing gives you more opportunities and real estate to compromise the defense versus if you're trying to drive and there's a player on your left hip 5 feet away, and then there's a player on your right hip 3 feet away, and then there's someone underneath the basket. And it's like, okay, if I drive here, there's going to be help. There's going to be help there. And if I pass it, the defender doesn't have to really move much to neutralize the entire threat. So I think just the emphasis on spacing and them doing a much better job with taking care of the ball. I think especially over the losing streak, like Jason mentioned, the live ball turnovers, there's no defense in the world for a live ball turnover. And if you add the lack of timeliness to that, where it's happening in the fourth quarter or in crunch time and you're down 2, you have a potential chance to tie, and then the team goes up 5 because you turn it over and then they knock down a 3 in transition. It's like little moments like that, just compiling over the course of a losing streak is what really can kind of put you behind the 8 ball. So the spacing and them just generally doing a better job taking care of the ball is really helping with all of that. And I think the defensive side, which hasn't been an issue, is also really just earning a lot more attention from that as well.
Yeah, I think if, like you said, if you can make the help defense, if you can force help defense to make a decision when your starting 5 is on the floor and you have the first steps of Courtney Williams, and then Marina Mabry isn't necessarily known for her speed, but it's her separation, and she is always an offensive threat when she has the basketball. So, like you said, if you can get a defender to come over and have to help on her, because she's had games this year where 36-point game against Indiana earlier this season. She saw her game really step up this past Saturday. That was really, really, that felt good as a Sky fan to see her get back on track, because then you have the threat of Courtney and her, and then of course it's Copper off the ball, your all-star, who, if you, like you said, she's catching and shooting at a 40% rate this year from 3-point range and just getting better and better at that, then it opens up the floor more and your spacing gets better. Because I think that's what you would love to see consistently, is the spacing there, is the ball movement there. And the ball movement looked really pretty at times the other day, and they weren't turning the ball over. That's why.
Exactly.
A lot of interesting things in play for tonight and for the rest of the season. This is the CHGO Sky Show. We want to thank our friends at Shady Rays for sponsoring the show. If any of you out there are going to be outside after this show is over, and why shouldn't you be? It's summertime in Chicago. The Stevie Wonder record is spinning, even though it's hotter than July. It's still cool in the city, beautiful. And Shady Rays has you covered with the best sunglasses, especially from an independent sunglass company out there. Frames are durable, the optics are extremely clear, and if you're like me and you're clumsy, or you just forget that you put your sunglasses on the couch and then you accidentally sit on them, every single pair is backed by lost and broken replacements. So if you lose or break a pair even the first day after you buy them, they will send you a brand new pair, no questions asked. Also, even better than that, Shady Rays is providing much needed support to nonprofit partners throughout the United States through Shady Ray's impact. That includes building play sets for pediatric cancer patients and providing young adults with multiple sclerosis the outdoor adventure of a lifetime. So Shady Rays, they're not only helping you, they're helping people in need across the country. If you don't love your glasses, exchange them for a new pair or return them for free within the first 30 days after you buy. And for all of our listeners out there, use that code CHGO for 50% off 2 or more pairs of polarized sunglasses. That's 50% off 2 or more pairs of polarized sunglasses. It's a different world for guys like us, Jason. Now there's sunglasses, there's frames galore. You don't have to be stuck with one pair of glasses all the time. So please use that code CHGO and buy your Shady Rays right now. And
I'm gonna get that code because sunglasses are key for long-term eye health, and eye health is key.
It's true.
So yeah.
Yeah, you can't call the game if you can't see the game. That's point blank period.
Yeah, no, it's great for long-term eye health, especially sun's out in Chicago, beautiful day. Got to get out and walk around the city while you can.
Also want to thank our partners at Game Time for sponsoring the show. For anybody out there for some reason did not know that Candace Parker, well, Candace isn't playing tonight. Thanks to our guy Mike Hughes for letting us know Candace is ducking the smoke tonight. But if anybody's trying to get down to Wintrust Arena and see that primetime matchup between the Las Vegas Aces and your own Chicago Sky, the Game Time app is where it's at to pick up those last-minute tickets and flash sales that will get you to the game within budget on time. They have seat views that you can see through the app. It is absolutely fantastic. I've used them myself multiple times this year already. And if you use the code CHGO, you get $20 off your first purchase. $20 off. That could be the price of the ticket itself. So why aren't you using Game Time? I have no idea. I have no idea why you don't already have this app on your phone downloaded. I've been telling you about it for weeks. Steven's told you about it for weeks. You don't want to just be sitting at home, letting the world go by you, seeing some of the best players in professional basketball in action. Download the Game Time app today. Terms do apply, but create an account and redeem that code CHGO for $20 off your first purchase. Game Time. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Jason, I know we got to get you out of here soon, but there are a few things that I wanted to ask you about that we've been talking about that's been the hot news ever since the All-Star break. Dwyane Wade joining the Chicago Sky ownership group. This has already had an impact. We showed that tweet that Steven had for Kalia Copper and her after the pre and post All-Star break, just getting to the rim, her free throw attempts. And that's something that the Chicago Sky need, a team that historically under James Wade had been free throw deficient. So she is one of their best at getting to the line. There was some kind of questions after James Wade's departure, whether Ka would be wanting to stay since she's in the final year of her deal. And she said outright, it's like, is Dwyane Wade coming in a big thing for her? She said, yeah, that is a big deal for me. So it feels like the Sky have a bit of leverage back, not leverage, I should say. They're in the driver's seat in terms of those free agency negotiations. So what have you seen or heard, or how do you feel about Dwyane Wade coming on for the Sky's ownership team?
Yeah, I was so pumped about it. And I think about a month before that, he attended a practice. And that's when we started to maybe think, could get something you'd love to see it down the road. And then a month later, he joins the ownership group. So that was when I think you felt the buzz of that. And he has a great friendship with now our former head coach and GM James Wade. And James had talked about how excited he would be at the possibility of that at some point down the road. And you could feel when the players talked about that experience of seeing Dwyane Wade at practice and getting to talk with him and feeling his support. You could see the smiles and the energy light up on their faces. That was really, really cool for them. And it's really, really cool for anyone who's with the Sky and is a fan of the Sky. And knowing that Dwyane Wade is such a genuine person too, in addition to all of the amazing accolades of his basketball career, I think he put out something along the lines of, I don't want to just tweet out, let's go support the W. I want to actually do something to go out and do that. And then he joins our ownership group. So I love that from him, and just his support of the league and the city of Chicago, where he's originally from and grew up. And I think I read an article where he said that his mom actually was a Sky fan before he was, back when the team was originally starting up. And we have a great group of people in the front office as well. And just to hear that Dwyane Wade and his family as a whole have been fans of the Sky for a long time, and now he's a part of it. And I think, like you said, you look at a free agent market, and I think that is something where if a player, visits our facilities or whatever it may be, and I know there's talks of potentially new practice facilities on the horizon as well. So any sort of investment in the franchise there could help out along that line, which is great. So yeah, I just think having that name and that person, more importantly, involved with your franchise is phenomenal. So I'm excited. Can't wait to maybe potentially meet him at some point. It'll be great. Yeah.
I feel the same way. I know Steven's feeling it too. Are you on mute, man? You might be on mute.
That's my second favorite basketball player of all time. There's nothing much more to say about that.
Jersey. There we go.
Yeah, I think just Kaz mentioned it as well. Having a player that has the type of gravity that Dwyane Wade has, as like not just an all-time great player, but somebody that can relate to the struggles and the things that they might be A, going through, or B, might desire in terms of a practice facility, and just understanding the players from a different perspective, having gone through it himself. She was just kind of mentioning how invaluable that is, especially coming from the front office, and having somebody that has more like a basketball background, not just a business background, making basketball decisions is extremely important. I think that level of relatability is something that's going to help the Sky pass potentially just Kalia Copper in the not too distant future.
So true. I agree with that. Definitely. I think, like you said, it's beyond just one player. It's everyone, and it's the future of the organization. And looking forward, this is great. It's a great start of things to come. And winning a championship just a couple of years ago now in 2021, and building off of that. And I think something to maybe focus in on Chris. I think that she's been a part of an organization that going into this year has wanted to stay competitive, and they want to build and continue to be competitive, which I think is an important thing. And that says something, that you want to be competitive and piece together a roster that's going to do that every night. That was one of my points of excitement going into this season. Something I love about calling this team every night is even amidst that 4-game losing streak, they're going to be competitive every day. And we have fiery personalities on our team like Ka, like Marina Mabry, who want to battle out of, say, it's a 4-game skid or whatever it might be. And they want to go out and compete, and they're going to be ready to battle for a postseason spot and hopefully get up into that 4 to 6 range so you avoid a first-round date with a Vegas or a New York, and just winning as many games as possible. That's a part of the mindset of this franchise, and you can feel that. And you could feel that with people before the season started. And I think when you're a player, any day of the week, you'd rather be in that scenario than the other way around.
Yeah, that was the message that I got from the team, even during that 6-game skid earlier in the season.
Yeah.
Marina said it, Courtney said it, Ka said it in different ways, pretty much. Watch our dust when we start to move. And so the sentiment has always been there that the team is just hunting for that time where they rip off 4, maybe 5 wins in a row and get back into the thick of the playoff race. And even earlier in May, when they're on that skid, where it's still May, you're looking at the end of the season in September, they were talking about when we make the playoffs. Like, there's never been a thought on this team of we are not making the playoffs or we're going to have to fight to make the playoffs. They're like, when we make the playoffs, here's how we're going to do it and how it's going to happen. So I'm glad that you said that, because I know that you would have more of a firsthand view of it than even we would covering the team just from your position. So I'm not surprised, but I am heartened as a person who covers this team, and as the lines are a little more blurred these days, as I can say as a fan of the team.
Yeah.
Speaking of battling,
yes,
we did get a question. I'm sorry, we got one question that I got to have you answer.
Oh yeah.
So after the Vegas game tonight, they've got Seattle and Phoenix, kind of a reverse bookend of those 2 games coming out of the break. And Edmund Fitzgerald asked us, what are you going to say on the live mic when Ka finally swings on Sophie Cunningham?
Oh, gosh. Yeah, they got pretty heated, last week against Phoenix. And was not a fan of the play by Cunningham that took Ka down. That, of course, you can't do that. So is the history there going back to the finals that Sky fans know about? Shout out to our fans, by the way, who we have one of the most knowledgeable fan bases that you'll find, and passionate fan bases. And that was kind of a follow-up note I wanted to give on the Dwyane Wade discussion, is we have a fan base that loves this team. And that title in 2021, you could see how quickly the city went over to Wintrust and supported this team and packed Wintrust. And they love the Sky here, and they love basketball here. So just a quick follow-up note on that. But gosh, I don't know. Hopefully that doesn't happen. But I am calling that matchup on Sunday with my good friend Stephen Bardo, Sunday afternoon. That'll be a fun matinee afternoon, and hopefully it's not too eventful. Maybe we'll get Phoenix back, I think, in the win column, most importantly, there on Sunday. So, maybe that'll be an important game, of course, in this packed schedule. It'll be intense, and those two have a history of intensity going at each other.
Yeah, and one thing about that matchup is Phoenix fans are not fans of Kahleah Copper, which, I mean, if you have a player that wasn't the best player on the team at the time come through your house and perform the way that she did on that final stage, I mean, I might not like her either. So I definitely get it from their perspective. But yeah, the whole Sophie Cunningham thing, which extends well past Kahleah Copper, but I think that's maybe the where it started at. That is inception. It just can't happen. It can't happen. And I do think the league has to crash down on that at some point, because it's gonna get someone hurt. And again, it being a non-basketball play, not even close to a basketball play, it just can't happen.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Ankle locks, man.
Yeah, it's you want to avoid injuries, and there's a play here where that can lead to an injury. So I think that's the most important thing, to crack down on that, and you just don't want to see anyone get injured. And of course, there's intensity there. There's history there, but you don't want anyone to get injured. And so that's the main thing there.
Yeah, it's egregious. I think it's the best way to say it. And it's funny because we've seen this. I know we put this tweet up, but everybody knows the Kahleah Copper. I think it was the exact same jerseys in Phoenix, with Ka just standing over Sophie at that yell, and it got put on T-shirts, it got put on mugs. People are drinking coffee out of those. He said, "Build a statue for it." The Sky are going to get statues up soon. At some point, they're going to get statues. Being the team that has won the championship most recently out of the Chicago professional sports teams, you would expect them to get a statue soon, and that would be. I know a guy down in Peoria who would make a brilliant version of that statue. Honestly. Jason, I know we're running up on our time here. Steven, I know you got to hit the road soon too. Just the last thing, DraftKings, our pick of the week. The Sky were over under 15.5 wins. They were favorites for that, but in a 40-game season, that'd still have them finishing at 16 and 24. That'll be the last question for both of you guys. Do you feel like the Sky at a 9-13 right now, are they on track to get to that 500 plateau or better? Are they going to be right between there and 16 and 20? Or are they going to be under that 15.5 prediction from DraftKings?
Ooh, I keep saying it. This feels like a really important patch to get to that hopefully over 500 mark. You got Dallas after this week when you play Phoenix and Seattle. I think if you can get Phoenix and Seattle, and then one of those games against Dallas as well, because you have two of them against Dallas. Hopefully you get both, but there it gives you, 3-4 more wins potentially. If you say you were to drop one against Vegas, you're kind of putting yourself in that range entering the final few weeks of the season to be one game or two games below 500 and chasing that mark. Then if you can get on a winning streak, maybe that 16 and 14 range around there is realistic. You've got, more games this year. So I still think it's definitely in the cards to get up above 500 this year. But right now, you got to close out July well and start August well. I think to be on track to doing that, you'd love to see it. So I'll go, for me, again, we haven't talked about the injuries this year as well that have been so hard on this team. But I think they definitely have the potential and the capability and the players to do it. But you really, really have to close out this month well. And just for our fans out there, finishing below 500 doesn't mean you don't make the playoffs. You still could make the playoffs that way. But your goal, I think, has to be between that 4 to 6 range in the standings right now. So I think they need to be above 500 to get that. And for me, hopefully the guy, Chris. So I'm going to go ahead and say they do. Maybe, hopefully, maybe 16, 17 wins potentially around that range.
And so for me, the Dream, I believe they're in the 6th seed right now. They're 3 games ahead of the Sky. And the Sky also have a 2-game jump on, I think it's Phoenix, and I can't remember who the other team is that's behind them. But point being, for them to get to the playoffs, they have to get to a certain number. And like Jason mentioned, if you want to duck going against one of the top 2 teams in the W and getting that 6 range, you're going to have to catch up with the Dream. And I think that number, I think it was 15.5 that Chris mentioned. You're going to have to be above that to get to that point. I think this team is more than capable of ripping off a handful of wins in this second half of the season. Maybe even some games that some people might not necessarily quote unquote expect them to win, just because of the weaponry that they have, and they're starting to build that cohesion and chemistry. So I think they'll finish above that 15.5. I think they'll finish with about 16, maybe 17 wins. If they can rip off a win streak and kind of build off of what we saw in the last game, I think that level of play will definitely get them to that number or even potentially exceed it.
There's a jumble in the standings right now, too, that could, you never know, could work in your favor. It was like this last year as well. You've got kind of Minnesota. Dallas has been surprised. I think Dallas has surprised some people this year. But you got a Washington team that's just over 500. Then behind us, Stephen, is LA, which is a team that's dealt with a lot of injuries as well. Right. They've dealt with actually more injuries than us and anyone in the league. So they just have to overcome so much. I don't see them potentially. They could make the playoffs. Maybe I don't see with everything they're going through right now. Shout out to our good friend Azrae Stevens, wishing the best for her down the stretch here. But, there's a jumble there where maybe anything could happen. Minnesota could fall off the Dream. At one point, we're the hottest team in the league. Just a couple of games ago, they had won 7 in a row before Connecticut kind of had their number in a 2-game stretch there. So maybe the Dream are a surprise team. I think their head coach, Tanisha Wright, could be in the mix for Coach of the Year, but they might go through maybe a younger team up and down spell potentially. But they've had our number this year. They've beaten us all 3 times. So it's kind of maybe hoping that there's a bit of a jumble going on, and maybe we can leap some people because of that.
It would be the hope. I know it's the hope. But like you said, we were talking about this stretch when we came on last week, that you had Seattle and Phoenix twice and a Dallas team that you absolutely have to get at least another win over because I think the Sky looked just about their best that they have all season against a contending team earlier this year when they beat Dallas at home. So you want to get another win against Dallas. Jason, we can't take any more of your time, man. I appreciate you coming on. Thank you as always. Appreciate any time that you spend with us, and we're looking forward to seeing you on television. Follow Jason on Twitter at Jason Ross JR1. That's right? Jason Ross Jr. 1.
Yeah, Jason Ross Jr. number 1. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, thank you guys for having me, though. Really appreciate it. Love the work that you do. Steven, can't wait to see you at more games this year. Maybe probably see you on Sunday, too, at the game. But no, you guys are the best. You guys do great work all around with all the different sports in Chicago, and this was an honor to be a part of it today.
Most definitely, man, for sure. And we're looking forward to whatever comes to mind as soon as Ka and Sophie, interact in some way in that game.
Hopefully we get the W. I'm just hoping for a W.
That is the best possible answer.
Yes.
For our producer, Stephen Nicholas, for everybody at CHGO, and for all of our listeners in the city and around the world, this has been the CHGO Sky Show presented by DraftKings. Use the code CHGO when you first sign up for the app and get $20 off your first bet. Stephen Gardner's got stuff coming out soon. Follow Stay True S.3 for more on the X's and O's and more on WNBA basketball. I'm Chris Pennant at Quandary Kitten. We'll see you next time.